Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. The old wooden house was almost as cold as the outdoors. No way. Even outside on this gloomy November day might have seemed more pleasant than inside an abandoned, long-neglected dwelling. The floral wallpaper barely held up on the walls of the miserable fiddler's furniture and floor. Dust and neglect everywhere. Maria sang and sang. She set her stuffed bag down on the decrepit table and walked over to the tin stove in the corner. A few split logs were found next to it. "Thank you, grandfather," Maria whispered. "You saved this for me. At least I'm warm now." She was now ready to talk to her grandfather, who had died 4 years ago. To seek help and protection from him, there was simply no one else to turn to, except that her grandfather wouldn't answer and wouldn't be able to help her grief. Just 2 weeks ago, she thought she was the happiest girl in the world. But today, she found herself in a village, forgotten by God and people, in an abandoned cold house, and it was lucky that at least such a shelter was found. Maria found a half-full box of matches and a stack of yellowed newspapers in the cupboards. She stomped on the stove. The case was habitually crumpled. A sheet of newspaper willingly burst into flames. Then the wood slowly took over. Maria squatted beside the stove, stretched her frozen hands close to the fire. Tears flowed from her eyes without stopping. Sobs chewed her throat. She cried for a long time because there was no one to comfort her. But then the tears somehow ended. Maria gradually calmed down. Tongues of fire arose in the stoves. The wood was quietly nodding. At least it was hope that soon it would be warmer in the house. Thank goodness the area was small. It had long been dark outside the window. Black shadows filled the corners of the room. Maria went up and flicked the light switch. The light bulb in the lampshade did not turn on. The girl went into the other room, making sure. There, too, the light wasn't on, though the bulbs themselves weren't blown out with lice. No surprise there. Everything in the house was literally falling apart. Tomorrow we'll have to solve this problem somehow. And today, I will have to spend the rest of the evening in the dark. Maria only now remembered that she hadn't eaten anything since breakfast, and one could hardly consider a complete breakfast an egg, a soft-boiled egg, and a sandwich with a circus on it. She couldn't even believe that recently she had been sitting in an expensive restaurant with her fiancé, looking through the menu in search of some original dessert that she hadn't had a chance to try before. And at school, the waiter with a duty smile stood at the table waiting for her order. The secured life quickly became habitual. After all, you get used to a good thing in no time. Maria found a rag, wiped off the dust from the table, took out a bag with a couple of cakes, bought at the bus station, and a bottle of water, hastily skewered. Although I didn't feel like eating at all, there was nothing else to do in the near total darkness. She decided to put the house in order and get settled in the morning. At 9 o'clock, she went into her former room without undressing. She curled up on top of the dusty blanket. She thought that after a long trip, she would fall asleep right away. But sleep did not come. In her memory, she could not stop turning back to fresh and old events. This remote village, where Maria had grown up, she had once left with joy. There was nothing particularly appealing to the young girl here. Young people tried to move to the city as soon as possible. It was mostly the old people who stayed in the village. Her grandfather took in his 6-year-old granddaughter after her parents were killed in an accident and raised her as best he could. But he always insisted that she had to be an excellent student, go to college, and make a life for herself in the city. Maria managed to get into a state finance department while she was studying. From time to time, she came to the village, tried to communicate with her grandfather more often. To tell the truth, all these trips were not very pleasant. My grandfather liked to drink. It would be a shame to say that every year he put more and more of them to the bottle. But he was the only one I knew, and even when he drank heavily, Grandpa didn't get picky and aggressive. So Maria continued to visit him. The news of his untimely death was a real blow. Maria was not prepared for that. It was scary to be all alone in the world. After the funeral, she closed the empty house, and since then, they visited it only a couple of times. In the city, life was not going too well either. Maria safely graduated from the institute, but who needs a young art historian with honors? That's right, no one. At least in the city where Maria lived, employers did not greet her kindly. Everyone wanted a perky sales manager. And the shy girl, who during her studies had a part-time job, sometimes in the museum, then in the library, no one was interested. As an employee of a temporary part-time job at a firm, where Maria substituted maternity leave, finished. In a hostel while kept, but the commandant declared that it is time to know the honor. And so when Maria was about to despair, she was invited for an interview at a large construction company. They were looking for a secretary of reference for the CEO. The resume was seen on the internet. Maria had no hope of success, and she had no experience at all. But still she came to the interview at the appointed time. She was not the only candidate. In addition to her, there were 3 other girls applying for the job, waiting in the waiting room. Judging by the conversations, the others had experience as secretaries and workers. So Maria had already decided that she was here for nothing. To her surprise, the personnel manager spoke to her kindly and friendly and said that the lack of experience was not so important. The main thing was the desire to work and the ability to learn quickly. Maria had plenty of that. And when she saw the CEO, she thought a miracle had happened. He struck her at first sight, the man of her dreams from another prosperous and interesting life. He was the man she had seen in her dreams. The girl poured paint, lowered her eyes, and could barely answer a couple of standard questions. However, Maria's awkward demeanor at the short interview with the CEO did not hurt her. 2 days later, the personnel clerk called and asked if she could go to work tomorrow. Of course, Maria happily said yes, ironed her only business suit, and the next morning she was in place half an hour before the start of the workday. She was very worried that she would not be able to cope with the unfamiliar and responsibilities. But everything went more or less smoothly. The girl who replaced Maria willingly helped in the beginning, introduced the newcomer to all the details, taught her everything. She herself was laid off because she moved to another city. And William, the CEO, from time to time, looked into the reception, and he kept a very friendly attitude. Maria had no problem getting used to the company, despite her usual shyness. I got to know all the employees fairly quickly. With some of them, I even became friends. Tried to quickly get into the business of the company. I came in early, left early. Later, I often missed my lunch break, all to keep William satisfied. She strove to be his indispensable assistant. On the whole, it worked out that way. She did make an excellent secretary. But Maria also became the mistress of her charming boss. 6 months later, William gradually began to show interest in her. Maria is good in front of her eyes, changed her clothes, changed her hair, began to skillfully use makeup. At work, every day flew like a holiday. She felt that the boss liked her. And then on New Year's Eve during the corporate party, William literally never let her down. Of course, he couldn't pay attention only to her. It would immediately become too noticeable as a good boss. William danced and joked with the rest of the staff. But Maria had no doubt he was thinking only of her. Late in the evening, when the participants of the corporate party already parted, the chief offered Maria a ride home. She happily agreed. The car door slammed shut. William played romantic music. Multicolored city lights flashed behind the glass. Maria had never ridden in such fancy cars before, and right next to her was the man who was everything to her. Maria ended up in the boss's huge apartment, more precisely, in his bed. In the morning, she had no regrets, and what was there to be sorry about? Her dream had come true. Her love at first sight was mutual. William grinned slightly and said, "I thought so. I was your first man. That's why I chose you at the interview. Can you count? It's a reward for my modesty." Their office romance has been going on ever since. Despite occasional moments when William didn't show the best sides of his character, Maria was over the moon because she loved her boss with all her heart. Soon he was visiting her home in the tiny one-room apartment on the outskirts that Maria had recently started renting. William, of course. It was a dwelling with furniture and a shabby rug on the wall that he didn't like. What squalor! I'll tell you what, baby, I'll get you a decent apartment myself. You can make a nice little nest for us there. It's not always convenient to meet at my place. 3 days later, Maria moved into a small but modern and fully furnished apartment near the center. And William also bought Maria fancy clothes, expensive lingerie, gave a few gold jewelry, offered to pay for visits to beauty salons. My woman should look dignified, like a queen. Maria tried to look so that the boss could be proud of her. They sometimes went out together to premiere presentations and social events. One day, William took her to the sea for 2 weeks. It was a real magical fairy tale. After all, Maria had never been to warm countries before. At work, they must have been aware of their connection. Although no indulgences were given to his mistress by the boss, she was still working at her best, had become his right hand. Time passed without a trace. William seemed fine with it. So was Maria. Of course, sometimes the thought flashed through her mind that if a man really loved a girl, he would propose. At least, that's what they wrote in the love novels. However, life is often at variance with what is written in books. Still, when Maria became pregnant, William reacted positively. Maria was even surprised, because she was afraid to tell him at first. You know, it's even, by the way, he said. Then my parents were all over my head. Lately, all they talk about is grandchildren, as if there were no other topics, even if you don't visit your grandparents. But now that you're pregnant, why not have an heir if you have a boy? It'll be great. Family continuity. Them and everything. Although a girl would be nice too. Maria couldn't believe her ears, so she had been worried for nothing that William would be against the baby, and he continued to make her happy. In a couple of days, I'll introduce you to the parents. What's the holdup? I think they'll be fine with you. My man will be happy to arrange the wedding. It seemed like all the dream cars were coming true. Meet the parents. The wedding baby from the man you love just didn't talk much about his past life. William added, for example, about your backwoods village is not necessary to tell. Well, you have no other relatives except grandfather. That's good. No one will spoil the impression at the wedding. What about your parents, that they had their own business before the accident? Like a couple of diners. Or did they? Better a wedding dress store. So the romantic William smiled. Maria's late parents were simple people. Her father drove a truck. Her mother worked on the farm nearest their village. When Maria was young, the family moved to the city, where her father took a job as a shuttle driver and her mother as a clerk in a grocery store. For the summer, Maria was sent to her grandfather for some fresh air. One weekend, they took the bus to visit her and got into an accident. Such was fate. Maria didn't quite understand why they had to make up tall tales about her parents. However, she didn't argue. Only you myself. I do not know how to lie so that they believed. It's a deal. It's not a lie. It's just alternative information. You know what I mean. My family won't like it if I tell them all about your family. That was the end of it. William was not deceived. 2 days later, he did take Maria to his parents' country house. Maria felt as if she were in a movie or on the pages of a glossy magazine. Of course, while interacting with William, she was going out in the world too. But here was an entire estate with a gorgeous house and garden. A landscaper had worked on it. There was even a pond with a fountain. Maria was already aware that William's father was a big businessman, well known in the city. A few years ago, he gave his son the opportunity to open his own company and helped him to expand. William successfully used his father's capital. Business in the construction company was successful. Profits were increasing every year. Kevin, the head of the family, a large gray-haired man, had an important self-confidence. It was easy to see who was boss. His wife Adriana looked surprisingly young. She looked more like William's older sister than her mother, all thanks to the art of plastic surgery and constant appearance care. They welcomed their son's fiancée quite friendly. There wasn't much warmth, but both of them were polite. "If that's the case and our grandson is on his way," Kevin said, "you don't have to wait too long for the wedding. We'll make sure everything is done right. We can have the wedding here. We can hire the caterers from the restaurant." Adriana replied, "We'll invite all the city's elite." "Where are you going on a wedding trip?" Kevin asked his son. William answered, "I haven't decided yet. Maybe Greece, maybe Spain." Maria didn't care which country the couple chose. The main thing was that they would go there together. The future seemed cloudless, full of joy and mutual love. "The parents accepted you," William said, on the way back. "You did well. You held yourself like a princess. I didn't expect it from you. It was really going well at first." Adriana was really into wedding planning, all the more so that the lady had no other activities at that moment. The servants took care of all the household chores, and the mistress of the house had all the time in the world. According to William, this was going to be a great event. Maria stayed out of it. No one was interested in her opinion anyway. The only thing she was allowed to do herself was to choose a wedding dress. True, she chose from several models, which were recommended by her future mother-in-law. Maria opted for a fabulous beauty outfit with hand embroidery, a puffed skirt, and an accentuated waist. Such a model she could afford. The gestational age was quite small. None of the guests would have guessed that the bride was pregnant. There was no need to wait a month for the registration, because the groom's parents had decided to celebrate the wedding quickly. Anything is possible for money. That's why the registrar set the date in 2 weeks. By that time, just finished preparing Maria. One could only wonder at the speed with which her fate was changing. But a week before the wedding, her destiny changed. Again, and now not for the better. Maria was going to work in the morning when she heard the key turn in the door. Maria, fully dressed, rushed out into the hallway, where William had just appeared. She was about to embrace her fiancé as usual, but suddenly she noticed a strange expression on his face. His face twisted with anger, his eyebrows furrowed. She had never seen him like that before. "What's the matter with you? Is something wrong?" she asked. William threw back sharply. "Yes, something happened. It's even better, though. It's a good thing it's all revealed now. Before the wedding. There will be no wedding, of course." Maria froze in surprise, and with difficulty she parted her lips and said still, "I hope this is some kind of misunderstanding." "Are you joking? Why isn't there going to be a wedding? I'm not such an idiot as to marry a slutty girl." It was unclear what to reply to this sudden, unwarranted insult. Maybe William was temporarily insane. He would come to his senses and take it back. Alas, William was determined and had no intention of backing down, going B, and his belongings were flitting from the apartment. He stepped into the room and slid open the door of the closet, casting a masterful glance over its contents. "So there's nothing of yours here. Only my gifts were bought with my money. But you can have some clothes. That's all right. You don't have to go away naked." Maria bit her lip to keep from crying out loud and silently began to pack. She packed a large gym bag, some documents, a pair of jeans and sweaters, and a few other small things. It didn't even occur to her to remind herself that some of the stuff she bought with her own paycheck. She certainly didn't get her salary for her pretty eyes, but for her work. Noticing that Maria was putting her laptop in her bag, William said grudgingly, "I am sure it is yours." At this point, Maria was no longer silent. "I bought the laptop on credit right after I got the job." "Okay. Can you take it back then?" He took out his pocket and carelessly tossed the workbook on the nightstand. "You can have that too. Fired as of today." "Wait, is that allowed?" "Anything's allowed in this firm. And don't even think about filing a complaint with the labor inspectorate. Otherwise you'll be fired under the article. That's why I wouldn't advise you to fight." Maria felt like she was in some kind of a bad dream. Now she would wake up, open her eyes, and everything would go back to normal. William would be the same. The nightmare will be gone. and all will be well. Nevertheless, the nightmare on his continued. William watched her movements around the apartment carefully, as if he suspected an attempt to steal someone else's property. Maria got dressed, pulled her hair into a ponytail. Done. Then out you go, William said. There was one blast of hope. Wait, what about the baby? Maria pleaded. Can't you leave him? Why are you doing this to me? It's a misunderstanding. Let's talk. We have nothing to talk about, he said. And the baby? I don't give a damn about somebody else's baby. I'm not gonna support other people's kids. Look for another idiot. Maria suddenly found the strength to resist. How long can you bully a man? After all, she has a right to at least know what happened. They had parted the day before, as usual, and after work, William drove her home and went on his own business. Everything was peaceful and quiet. There was no sign of such a storm. I'm not going anywhere until you explain what happened. Maria slumped in her chair from crossing her arms over her chest. William only grinned. I knew you'd cling to me. Okay, you asked for it. He left the apartment and returned in half a minute, escorted by two grim-looking jocks. Get this girl out of my apartment. Don't forget to leave the keys to the door. The contract is in my name, so you're not wanted here. One of the jocks grabbed her under the elbow, and then William suddenly said stop. For a second, it seemed like he was laughing. I'm sorry, honey, it was a prank. Did you really believe it? However, William added back the ring. The ring glimmers of hair on her ring finger, 3 bags. Stylish, not conspicuous, but very expensive. William picked it out at a jewelry store on Main Street. Can't you hear it? William asked irritably. Maria pulled the ring off her finger, which she did not immediately dream. It was as if she resisted. Nothing else kept her in the apartment. The jock grabbed Maria by the elbow again and summoned her to the entryway. The other took the bag and followed them in. William, standing on the doorstep, watched with a chuckle as his ex-fiancée was shoved into the elevator. Then Maria was put in a car and driven to the outskirts of town in the exact neighborhood where she had once rented a tiny room. It was useless to resist and simply terrifying. The car door was opened. Get out. Then the car turned around and drove away. And just like that, Maria was on the street. What to do in this situation? Who could she turn to for help? She had no relatives or close friends. It just so happened her friends from school had left, and there weren't many of them. There was only one former classmate, Jenna, left in town. That's where Maria went. Luckily, Jenna was home. She was in a lousy mood, though. Their department had been sent on a 2-week sabbatical the day before, so money problems were looming. The firm where she worked to the operators in the near future could go bankrupt. And then the girlfriend, with whom we had not communicated for a long time, suddenly showed up all in tears and with a bag in his hands. And I warned you this William wasn't right for you, Jenna said as she sat Maria down at the table and put a cup of tea in front of her. I mean, I've seen him puffed up turkey a couple of times. Other than 1 million, there's nothing good about him. He's not puffed up, hobbled Maria. He used to be so good. Took such good care of me. I just can't believe it's over. And it's on the eve of my wedding. Where do I go now? I'm not going back to work, of course, now that I've been fired. But a fool can't fire a pregnant woman like that. Although since the owner of the company decided to survive anyway, all right. You can stay with me for the first time, and then we'll see. But as you can see, I also have a lot of problems now, so the costs are shared. Maria gratefully agreed. But living in someone else's apartment was not easy. The very next day, Jenna started making snide remarks, as if she hadn't noticed how much she was hurting her friend. That's what happens when you fly too high, you fall to the ground. You were going to invite me to the wedding, were you? No, that you definitely would have. That's where Maria lied. She wanted to invite me, Jenna as a witness. But William was adamantly against it. Your friend is going to ruin the whole picture. She has no business being at our wedding. and your maid of honor will be my cousin. Maria agreed at the time. She never argued with William, though she had no idea how she was going to explain herself to Jenna. If only she had known in advance that the wedding would be ruined. Maria had very little money left. She spent practically everything on her salary card on a wedding dress and shoes. And the second card, on which William sometimes deposited money, was blocked. The luxurious dress remained in the closet along with the rest of the expensive items Maria now had no access to. And Jenna still wouldn't settle down. For some reason, she did not save money while she had the opportunity. How could she trust a man? So she was left with a broken home. Maria and herself has already realized how unreasonable and naive behaved. But it was too late to fix it. Oh, Maria, how stupid are you? You let your fiancé get away. It's your own fault. You let him walk all over you. That's why he's gone to pieces. I wouldn't let that happen if I were you. Frankly, Jenna's reasoning was purely theoretical. She herself had had some pretty bad experiences in relationships. During her college years, 2 brief affairs had ended before they had even begun. Nothing else was on the horizon. But who's going to pass up a chance to pick up a recently successful girlfriend? Maria wanted to say that Jenna was unlikely to manage William. But I did not dare to argue, replied. That's the way it happened. Maybe try to connect with his parents, suggested her friend. What if they do not know that their son threw you out? You said that they wanted grandchildren and rushed from the wedding. Maria thought it was worth a try, too. Address as she remembered, one day she made up her mind and went to the country house with William in a cab. It was a pity the trip proved fruitless. She pressed the bell button for a long time, but no one answered. The treacherous gate remained closed. Maria was about to drive back when a guard approached the greasy metal grill. You've been told they don't want you here anymore. But why? I really need to talk to Kevin and Adriana. Let me through, please. I've told you everything. Go away. Otherwise, I'll have to take action. This is private property. That was the end of the conversation. Maria got into a cab under the guard's heavy stare. She had to go back home. Even without making sure with her father-in-law and mother-in-law, all the way back Maria, it seemed that the cab driver was looking at her with curiosity and a sneer. Of course, he observed the unpleasant scene near the gate. It was very embarrassing in front of a stranger. However, this was by no means the greatest trouble. She would have to look for a job as soon as possible to get some sort of source of income. Maria hoped to find a new place as soon as possible. She was able to go to several interviews. In another situation, work experience in a large, successful company would have come in handy. But now she had to answer intrusive questions from the personnel department. Why did you quit your previous job? Can you give references from your previous employer? Maria, blushing, confused herself, knowing that this only harms himself. Some of the personnel officers told her directly that they had made inquiries and that she had been painted in blackest colors at her previous work. If you believe the reviews on Maria, she was a terrible employee. Constant absenteeism, conflicts, lies. She even dragged stationery home from her desk. Girl, you with such a characteristic will not take in any decent firm, said one of the staff. Well, how could you? I am not guilty of anything, Maria mumbled. But it was hard to prove now. At first she had thought that the influence of her former boss could not spread throughout the city. But everywhere she went, she was rejected. You have to get a job right away. Jenna reminded her after another unsuccessful interview. It's okay now. No one suspects you're pregnant. But after that, it'll be obvious. Who's going to hire you for a new job with a bellyful? So don't wait up. You'll take any job you can get. I can't wait, I told Maria. I'm sure I'll get a job. I sent my resume to the next job ad. By now she was ready to work as a conductor or a janitor, just to start earning money again. As luck would have it, even those unassuming jobs were hard to find at this point. For some reason, it just didn't add up. The situation got even worse. On one rainy, gloomy day, Jenna disappeared somewhere for 3 hours, came back in a very gloomy mood. silently took off her coat and wet boots, went into the kitchen, put the kettle on, then the cake she had brought and invited Maria to the table, moved the plate with a piece of cake to her, and said, "I have some bad news, girlfriend. Our firm is closing. Today there was a staff meeting. They promise, of course, to pay severance pay, but it's unlikely. In general, I'm also now unemployed." "Well, then we'll look for a job together." Maria responded, "It'll be more fun. Something will turn up." "No, I have other plans. I'm going to rent out my apartment. In the meantime, they'll move in with my parents temporarily. It'll be a bit cramped, but I'll put up with it. They'll probably move to Detroit next month. I have an aunt there. She's been calling me from work for a long time, and she said she'd help me out. That's the way it is. Long story short, the day after tomorrow, the apartment will move in. I already signed the contract. So yes, Jenna has already decided everything and planned. And in those plans, Maria, her problems had no place. Okay, she answered quietly. I'll try to think of something to do with the apartment. Don't be offended, okay? It's just the way it is. It's not easy for me to say no to you tomorrow, and even the day after tomorrow, you can stay here till lunchtime. Then the not-so-cozy temporary shelter had to be abandoned. There was nowhere to go. Maria devoted the rest of the time to looking for a place to rent. Unfortunately, all options were unaffordable. Everywhere, even for the most modest room, had to pay up front, provide a deposit, and so on. The shabby apartment on the edge of the city, which William had once rejected, now seemed Maria's inaccessible paradise. Her hands. She was desperate, perhaps. She decided to go back to her old job. After all, she still had some personal belongings there. A few notebooks, shoes, cosmetics, tea utensils, other little things. She had every right to take her belongings. And so Maria got on the trolley bus near the end of the day. I planned to get there on foot, so we already spent a lot of money on public transportation while I was running around for the interview. However, 8 stops on foot is still a bit far. The more so, a prolonged rain charged again. She didn't want to show up at the office with muddy shoes and wet hair. Not so long ago, she'd been moving around the city in a silver William luxury car with a generous leather interior, or calling a cab. And now she had to count the rubles to pay the trolleybus fare. How quickly the usual prosperous life crumbled. Maria got off at the right stop and walked down the street, trying to avoid the puddles. She wished for the 100th time that she had asked Jenna for an umbrella. At least the jacket had a hood. Maria was already approaching the building when she was handed a muddy drive-away. The car was a blue Opel, she knew. It belonged to Ben Deputy William, just like that from head to toe. And as if nothing had happened, drove on his urgent business. Didn't even notice. And before, Ben had generously given Maria compliments and tried to appear courteous. Maria easily managed to slip past the guard at the entrance. She feared that the guard here had also been instructed not to let the former employee pass. However, all turned out well. Maria decided it was a good sign and a little reassurance. She went up to the 2nd floor, which was entirely occupied by the line in the corridor. No one came her way, and she entered the reception area without a hitch. The hostess had already changed there. A beautiful young blonde was seated at Maria's desk. She entered for a manicure with her other fingers on the keyboard. At the sight of the visitor, broke away from her occupation. She said, "Hello, good afternoon. You're here to see William. He's not here right now, but I'd be glad to help you." How quickly he found a replacement for Maria. The assistant manager's position was not vacant for long. Maria was unfortunate to admit that the new referent made a very pleasant impression. However, the fact remained. The girl was exceptionally good-looking and had a disposing demeanor. Maria's pity burned, but she tried to pronounce it as calmly as possible. "I used to work in your place. I came to get my things." "Yes." The blonde stared at her with undisguised curiosity. "They didn't tell me anything about your stuff. Let me ask one of the employees. You can get Miranda from accounting. She knows me well. I'll give her a call." The blonde found the right number and asked Miranda to come to the front desk on the phone. Maria often talked to Miranda and considered her a friend. If not a friend, then a friend. They often had coffee together and chatted about trifles. They discussed company news and personal matters. Miranda soon appeared. She appeared slightly embarrassed. Maria tried not to make eye contact. "Oh, hi. How are you? I took your things to my office. Here, please. Everything is safe and sound." Miranda was holding a box of office paper. Together with Maria, they began to put a few things into the bag. Of course, Maria couldn't wait to ask her friend. Surely, she knew something. Only the presence of the new girl was a hindrance. But Maria hoped to talk privately somewhere in the corridor. And then William himself walked into the waiting room. Instantly, a stunned Maria walked past him into his office and slammed the door. The key was heard turning in the lock. Naturally, Maria rushed to the locked door. "William, open up." There was silence in response. "Open now, you hear." Miranda retreated to the far corner. But the blonde rushed to defend the office in which her boss was lurking. "What do you think you're doing? Girl, William is busy. If you have any questions for him, I'll pass it on. I don't need a transmitter. William, open up, you lousy coward." Maria couldn't stop talking, though such behavior was certainly not typical of her. She herself would never have thought herself capable of so much bravery. "Young lady, leave immediately. I'll call security or call the police, and I'm not going anywhere." At the noise in the waiting room, the staff ran away. But no one was able to cope with Maria's rampage, or rather, no one even tried. Too shocked by her unaccustomed behavior, she kept pounding on the door of William's office. "Why don't you say something? I'm ashamed to look me in the eye." This scene could not go on indefinitely. The blonde went back to her desk and dialed a number. "We have a visitor here scandalized by security." "What? Why don't you have to? Can't you leave your post?" "What do you mean? Handle it yourself." She cut the conversation short with annoyance. Apparently, the security guard at the office center shirked his duty to pacify a rowdy visitor. After all, he was paid at the office center, and he was not registered with the company line. Surely William, sitting outside the door, regretted not getting his own security guard. That's when the frightened blonde called the police after all. As she threatened to do, 2 officers arrived within minutes. The department was on the next street over. However, their appearance had no effect on Maria. Even a modest, quiet mouse could sometimes go into a frenzy if she was pestered enough. When Maria was dragged away from the door, she clung first to the doorknob, then to everything in her path. An armchair, a desk, a closet fell to the floor, office folders, pens, and other office stuff scattered across the floor. Of course, eventually 2 tough guys overpowered the frail girl and led her out of the reception area in a police car. Maria was subdued and began to realize that she had gotten herself into a very bad story. She was already ready to be handcuffed and thrown into a cell with street girls and drug addicts. Fortunately, in reality, it wasn't that bad. Quite friendly middle-aged police officers chatted with her in her office. He listened with interest to the short version of their misadventures, put aside the sheet of paper on which he was going to write the protocol, and let the offender go in peace. True, he warned her next time she would not get off so easy. Maria was ready to swear there would be no next time. She'd had enough of one. Never again. By now, she truly didn't know what had gotten into her. After all, she had always been so quiet and shy, probably never raised her voice once in her life. And then all of a sudden, her cheeks were burning. Her legs were dying as she walked slowly out of the police station. Maria walked with her head low, but she noticed that the officers were looking at her with smiles. One young lieutenant even winked. So the story about the office mouse bully had already spread. What a shame. She made it to her temporary home, just stepped parallel to the trolley line already on the front porch. With horror, she thought she had lost her keys along with her bag, but immediately found the bag hanging on her shoulder, and in her right hand a bag with a notebook and shoes, and other things from the office. It seems that Miranda handed this bag to one of the police officers. When Maria left the police, the bag was returned to her along with her bag. However, she did not remember exactly. It was all a blur. Jenna was home. She looked at Maria, who had dropped the bag on the floor of the hallway, and was slowly pulling off her jacket, tangling it in her sleeves. "What's wrong again?" Maria was ashamed to retell the recent events, so she answered evasively. "Nothing much. I stopped by the office, picked up my stuff." She took out of the bag, wrapped in another bag, shoes unfolded, put on the floor. "Light except a modest gift. After all, we have the same size. I only put them on twice. Good. Real. French. And the leather is natural. The shoes, of course, are cool." With some doubt, Jenna responded, "But why such expensive gifts all of a sudden? You are unlikely to be able to buy them now. I don't have to. I don't have to wear those stilettos in the countryside. But you might need them." Wait. What countryside? I'm leaving tomorrow. It's the village where I grew up. That's where Grandpa's house is. It's far from here. 6 hours by bus, and then another hour or so on foot if I don't get a chance. That's a hell of a place," Jenna exclaimed. "And what are you going to do there in that village of yours?" "I'll live there for a while. At least I won't have to pay the rent." "What are you going to eat?" "There's a store there, and I have enough money for bread and pasta for now." Jenna was still looking at her incredulously, as if she could not understand how she could go so far away. "Do you even remember that you're pregnant? You have to get registered with the doctor. Go to the doctor." And in general, it was a painful question, thinking about which Maria wanted to postpone. "Don't talk about it now. I already had a hard enough decision to make. Somehow, gradually, I will figure it out. But look, it's just the beginning. And then there's no telling what's gonna happen to your health. So, sex isn't a gift either, by the way." Maria only had to hope that the pregnancy would go relatively normally. The nearest hospital was only in the district center, which was still a long way from the village, a drive away. Jenna perked up. "And you know you're going to sue your millionaire for child support. He thought you were going to raise the baby alone. You're so smart. Do a genetic test and hello. You were only with him, weren't you?" "Jenna, William was my first and only." "Well, then let him pay the full price. How many cases like this do you see on shows like this? There's no way around it. That's just the kind of stuff you see on TV. In reality, it's probably more complicated than that. And I'm not going to embarrass myself. Sue him. I'm ashamed of myself. He knows that very well. You're such a wuss, aren't you? I'd be all right if I were you. You got a baby to have, and then we'll think about it." Jenna kept at it, throwing up more and more questions. "At least there's internet in your neck of the woods. Otherwise you'll be out of the country. Internet is unlikely. At least not before. There's not even a good connection there. It's hard to get through. If anything, we'll write paper letters to each other in envelopes." "Maria, are you kidding in this situation? You're an odd one, aren't you? I can't remember the last time I held a letter in my hands." The next morning, Jenna accompanied Maria to the bus station. She could feel that she did not want to let her go, but she did not dare change anything either. Just before the bus left, Jenna said, "Maybe you can stay here. After all, there is no place to stay in my parents' apartment. But I'll try to put you with someone I know, at least for a few days. And then the light, when the few days are over." "No, I have already decided I will not retreat. William won't let me live peacefully in the city. I'd rather go away. I don't want to be a burden to anybody. Oh, I wish I could get a job. As luck would have it. Don't be mad at me, girlfriend. It's just that I already got an advance on the apartment. I'd hate to break up with her. It's hard to find decent tenants too." "Yeah, I get it. Jenna, I really appreciate it anyway. Without you, I'd be lost." The bus honked. They hugged each other goodbye. "If you have to go back, we'll think of something," said Jenna hurriedly. "Maria, here, take as much as I can. She slipped $200 into her jacket pocket. Maria almost cried. Her gratitude overwhelmed her. She had grown accustomed to loss lately, and here was a sudden and sincere support. "Thank you, Jenna. You're my only support and backbone. What would I do without you?" Maria got on the bus, sat in her seat at the back of the salon. She waved to her friend. It wasn't long before the journey began behind the long, unwashed glass. First, she glimpsed city streets, then warehouses on the outskirts. Next stretched the squishy suburban leafy wasteland. The road was familiar, only before Maria drove to the countryside with a different mood. And now it was so hopeless that I didn't even want to think about anything. No attempt was found, so I had to walk from the bus stop. It wasn't a very pleasant, kind of bad road among the abandoned fields, especially when the autumn twilight is about to fall. In Soviet times, there were repair shops, more or less well-kept areas. Cowsheds are now established farm, nothing left to the nearest farm, which once worked as a car mother. It was still a long way to go. Maria bravely answered questions confidently in front of her friend and generally tried to control herself. But finding herself all alone, again fell into despondency, especially annoying obsessive fear that she would come to the village and there is no home. Completely ruined or burned down. Anything could happen without supervision, but her fear did not materialize. The house was still there, though visibly dilapidated. Maria turned on the bed, cupping herself with her hands, trying to keep at least a little warm. At night she returned the wool blanket, but it didn't do much good. The room was completely cold. Outside the window came a gray morning, the first morning in the new old place. "Hey, there's someone here." A man's voice was heard from afar. Maria, who had been asleep, did not even know which side it came from. She sat up abruptly on the bed. And then a strange man appeared on the threshold of the room. "I didn't know the landlady had returned," he said in a surprised voice. The gates wide open, the curtains drawn back. I thought maybe some vagrants or thieves had got in. But what was there to take? There was really nothing to take in the house. Maria, however, did not like the tone of the stranger. And anyway, what right did he have to break into someone else's house? What did he care? "Who is here? Are you sure I am not a tramp and a thief?" she asked, grudgingly. "You don't look it." The boy answered nonchalantly. "I haven't signed my name in a week, though." Maria looked at him casually, trying to keep the strands of her long brown hair in place overnight. The guy smiled broadly. "Come on, it's not that bad." Maria smiled slightly in response herself, too, not wanting that very first glance. The stranger didn't like her. His sudden intrusion seriously frightened her. By now, however, he seemed quite good-looking. He was taller than average, gray-haired, and had thick, slightly russet hair. He was Maria's age or a little older. He was dressed simply in jeans and a worn leather jacket and carried a roomy bag on his shoulders. "Okay, I'll take your word for it," friendly said Maria. "Anyway, there is no mirror in the room." "By the way, you can speak by the way," the guy answered. "My name is Frank. I'm the local letter carrier." He slapped his hand on his bag. "I'm Maria. So you're Stephen's granddaughter?" "Yeah, I just got here last night, and it was too late to clean the house. There's no electricity yet. It's bad without electricity, of course," Frank said sympathetically. "I can try to fix it." "That would be wonderful. But what if he doesn't know much about electricity and will only make things worse? And if he really fixes it, how much will he charge?" "What about you?" "I mean, you do." "Don't worry, I do. Let me see." "Thank you. I'll show you." "Maria's up on the bed. I'll find it myself. Don't worry about it." "I'm sorry I barged in like that. It's just you have to keep order in your station. There's no one else." Suddenly, the gates open, and there's obviously someone in the house. I had completely forgotten about the gate. "Guilty," said Maria, though she was not obliged to answer to a stranger, but I did not close the gate, and it was all right. Frank, meanwhile, stopped talking and left the room in silence. Maria got up neatly, shot the bed with a blanket, then sat down on the bed again. She didn't know whether to leave the room or wait. She felt uneasy that someone was in charge of an abandoned and unsightly dwelling. And at the same time, she was glad. After all, at least one domestic problem could be solved so soon, and as if by itself. 15 minutes later, she heard the landlady taking the job. She went out into the other room. Frank flicked the switch and the light bulb went on. Then the guy turned on the light in the tiny hallway in bedroom. Everything was all right now. It's livable. Thank you so much. How much do I owe you? What are you trying to do to me? I was just helping out as a neighbor. That's all. You're welcome if you need anything. I don't mind. After all, I live near the store in a house with green hundreds. You can find my house for me. Yeah, sure. Thanks again. Maria didn't remember such a house. The store was relatively far away. The settlement was not so small. The area was extensive. It was just that most of the houses were empty now. In the old days, there were quite a lot of people living there. But I've got mail to deliver. Have a good day too. Frank went outside. Then Maria watched him from the window as he glimpsed over the fence and finally disappeared around the corner of the next house. However, there was no time to look out the window. Maria had grand plans for the day. She had to try to put the house in order, to make it more or less habitable. First, however, it wouldn't hurt to have some breakfast, so as not to fall down from hunger. Even cooking and cleaning up was not as easy as in the city. Yes, city comfort wasn't something to look forward to anytime soon. They had to readjust to a life without comforts. There was no getting around it. Besides, daily routine was a great excuse to distract from sad thoughts. Maria, once she stoked the stove and visited the barn, made sure there was a small supply of firewood. That was already a big plus. Enough for the first time. She brought water. She put the big kettle on to boil. At first, she couldn't quite put her finger on it. Where to begin? Everything around her seemed so unattractive. But the main thing was desire and time, and she would find the strength. Maria soon coped with dust and cobwebs. Several times she ran out for water. The well was in the yard, thanks to her grandfather, who had taken care of it. When she had a chance, Maria once again splashed some hot water in a bucket to mix it with the icy water from the column with warm water to throw the floors. Everything else in the house was much nicer. The work was just as boiling. Constantly moving, Maria lit up and even blushed through the dishes, put the cabinets on the shelves in perfect order, was glad that mice did not settle in the abandoned house, spread his few belongings in the closet. In the small room, kicked out the mottled halves, folded garbage, an old bag to throw out later. Meanwhile, the kettle boiled again. She washed her hands thoroughly, made soup from a bag on a cut bun, threw a tea bag in a cup, and poured boiling water in it. Got a big apple and a bag of caramels out of her bag. While she was eating, she caught herself thinking that not once all morning did she think of William and his dastardly act. That's what it means to be distracted. But then her thoughts turned again to the recent nightmare events. What had she done wrong to him? Why had he changed so much in one night? Though, come to think of it, he hadn't changed that much. I mean, William hadn't made such a scene before, but it was easy to remember that he was always arrogant. His opinion was to be considered absolutely correct. Anyone who dared to contradict him automatically became an enemy. Maria had simply tried not to notice it before, adjusting to his wants and not giving a reason for it. She had a malleable nature from birth. She preferred not to argue. In addition, she loved William without memory. He became for her the ideal man. To be honest, she had no one to compare it to. Maria had no other relationships. William was her first and only. The house was more or less normal now. At least it was clean. Maria decided to walk to the store. The groceries she had brought would not last long. She got dressed and went outside. This time she carefully locked the gate so that the letter carriers would have no reason to visit the station uninvited. Of course, she was grateful to Frank for his unselfish help, but he seemed too cavalier. Maria, taking her time, walked down the narrow street past the aging fences. The sky, too, was gray and gloomy. It was a bleak, bleak picture. Not a single person came into sight. It was as if the village were extinct. Would Maria have to bury herself here for a long time? After all, she had longed to get out of here, to move to the city, where every day there were interesting events. She remembered the art exhibitions she had enjoyed attending during her time at the Institute. She remembered the wide, full of stylishly dressed passers-by, the brightly colored storefronts, the cozy cafes. It was all so infinitely far away. Right in front of her appeared the dilapidated buildings of the only store in the village, for as long as Maria could remember. That building was in need of repair, but nothing had changed for the better. At least the store worked. That was already a good thing. She went inside, said hello to the saleswoman who had passed away behind the counter. "Hello, Aunt Kate." The woman immediately perked up. "Oh, Maria, are you there? Haven't seen you in 100 years. When did you arrive?" "Yesterday." "Are you thinking of selling the house?" "But who's going to buy it? Your Makarova's neighbors have been selling for 3 years, although their house is nice and the land is well groomed. No, I'll live here while I clean up and rest in the fresh air at the same time." The saleswoman looked at her with surprise and distrust. "Are you serious? People on vacation at resorts, not in our backwoods. It would have been fine in summer, but now it's the slush. You're doing all right in town, aren't you?" "Yeah, it is. I can't tell Aunt Kate the first gossip from the village about a complete disaster in my personal life and work. My vacation this year fell on November, and a trip to the sea fell off. A friend could not go with me alone. I have not decided how then, and gathered here. It's been a long time. I was already afraid that the house was going to fall apart unattended." That sounded pretty convincing. Anyway, Maria wanted Aunt Kate to believe it. Well, if only so, the saleswoman was still incredulous. Truly, Maria foresaw that her arrival would be discussed by the local gossips for a long time to come. Surely they will come up with their own versions. The store has always been the center of discussion and exchange of opinions. "What are you going to buy?" Maria looked at the counter. Frankly, the prices in the city supermarkets were noticeably more democratic than in this rundown village store. How good of Jenna to share the money with her friend. That modest sum came in handy. Maria bought cereal and pasta, a carton of eggs, a bag of flour, salt, sugar, a loaf of bread, and a bottle of sunflower oil. She wanted to buy something else for tea, but changed her mind. After all, from now on she had to live in austerity mode. There was no telling what would happen with the money. A bag of groceries came with her. Maria wanted to stock up properly now, so as not to show up at the store for longer. Aunt Kate was very nosy. She cared about everyone. Maria paid and was about to leave, but she gave in to temptation and bought 2 packages. She put the ice cream in a bag on top of everything else. "Do carry such a heavy weight." I wondered, and the saleswoman would have come in later. "I'm here all the time. I'll carry it. It's not very far." Well, look. Actually, Maria overestimated her strength. She realized that as soon as she came down from the store porch. But she couldn't go back. Her hands were heavy in the bags and her palms were cradled in the palm of her hand. Her fingers went numb very quickly, and the bag could easily tear from the overload. Maria tried to walk as fast as possible, although it did not really work. Suddenly, the weight disappeared. Maria took a breath with relief. The bag was in the hand of Frank, who silently came up from behind and intercepted the car without further ado. But it wasn't that hard for him to carry. "You're not a jock, you're a girl. That bag probably weighs more than you." Frank joked good-naturedly. "You couldn't tell if you were going to fall, or the bag. Are you expecting visitors from the city?" "No, I just thought I'd stock up on food, so I don't have to go to the store every day." "I see. Are you staying with us long at all?" Maria shrugged. If she could answer that question accurately. I don't know yet. Maybe a couple of weeks, maybe a month. You're kind of mysterious. Then they walked in silence for a while. This part of the village, unlike the one where Maria lived. At least there were no abandoned backyards to be seen here. And here was my little house. Frank pointed to a sturdy house with green sides, peeking out from behind a sturdy fence. You know, I can't remember you, Maria admitted. We were supposed to go to the same school. In fact, everyone in the village knows each other. I didn't even go to school with you. Otherwise, you would have remembered me. The boy responded lightheartedly. My mom was born and raised here. And then she went to the city when she retired. I was drawn to my homeland. Had to fix up my grandma's old house for her, roofed it up, and everything. The roof was really new, and overall, the house looked great. Obviously, a lot of work and money had gone into it. I just drove around once in a while. Long story short, Mom loved it here. She even got a job as a letter carrier to talk to more people. Then in August, she got sick. She had problems with her legs before, but now it's really hard. I wanted to move her to the city. She refused categorically. She is a good girl, but terribly stubborn. I had to quit my job and move here. You can't leave her alone. She can barely even walk across the room on crutches. Well, that's okay. It'll get better somehow. Maria never would have thought that this outwardly harmless and self-confident guy, such a challenge in life. Would you like some ice cream? She suggested. Would I? The ice cream turned out to be uncommonly tasty. It was almost the same as when I was a kid, when my grandfather used to give Maria some change for ice cream and lollipops a couple of times a month. It was a real treat. So you used to deliver mail for your mom. Work. Don't beat a man when he's down. Well, it's just so I don't have to be on the spot all day. So I work remotely. You can design houses anywhere. You're an architect. Yeah, but there's still no internet here. But that's solvable. Whenever I need to, I drive to the district center. It's quick. They've already progressed to the internet there. They barely had ice cream and chatted about trivial things all the way there. Maria and did not notice how I found myself in front of my own tile. The guy carried the bag into the house, put it on the floor in the hallway. Frank, thank you so much. That's the second time you've helped me out. Yeah, I told you to call me if you needed anything. Thank you, too, for the ice cream. And he disappeared as quickly as he had in the morning. Maria continued to set up her little household through the evening. Everything that could be done under the circumstances was done. The dishes shone with cleanliness. The mirror, too, the remnants of dust had vanished without a trace. The modest dwelling no longer looked neglected. It looked poor, but clean. Maria had put the barn in order for tomorrow. So, too tired already. She looked in the little jar. Her worst fears were confirmed. The floor had fallen in, and the roof was gone too. Judging by the state of one of the walls, it was quite sad. Of course, it was possible to wash, and there was water in the house. There was a stove, there was clean water, there was a bucket to be found. And the big lahan was stored in the barn. That's all right. People used to live in worse conditions. Maria remembered her city bathroom, with its sparkling showers, stylish Italian tiles, and lots of pretty little things. There were all sorts of beauty products on the shelf there. Now all that was available was shampoo, a bar of baby soap, and a cheap rocker. She bought all of these on sale at a convenience store near Jenna's house. True, a small supply of cosmetics was saved for her by Miranda. Maria remembered the wild scene she herself had made in the office, and dejectedly the way back was booked. Never again would she cross the threshold of the firm, where she was rightly considered to be a discreet, impeccable employee, never once raising her voice. However, what has been is gone. Nothing could be changed now. The mood was completely ruined. Maria went inside, turned on the light. What a blessing that at least the electricity could be used. If she still had to sit in the dark, it would have been a nightmare ordeal altogether. Maria settled down on the bed, threw a warm shawl over her shoulders, found it in the closet, and picked up her laptop. She had a vague hope that by some miracle, the internet would work. Needless to say, no miracle happened. There was no connection to the World Wide Web, and there couldn't have been. Frank had made it clear. Then she began to look at the pictures in which she looked so happy. Fancy outfits, open smile, bright surroundings. In some of the pictures, William was there too. True, he usually did not like to be photographed with her trying to get away. I had to talk him into it, and sometimes he indulgently agreed. What a handsome man, as if from the pages of a fashion magazine. Sporty without being skewed, above average height, correct facial features, and so rotten inside. As it turned out, threw out of the house of his fiancée, the mother of his future child, and then hid from her behind the back of the secretary. Didn't even deign to leave the office. Maria remembered how much time she worked overtime, weekdays and holidays. She worked her ass off to make sure everything ran smoothly in the company. She did everything she could. It wasn't that little that depended on her. She smoothed out conflicts and misunderstandings between clients and employees and started going to the other end of the city to deliver documents on time. She never forgot or confused anything. And now she received a commendation. She was just thrown out on the street. What was it about? Should she have gotten used to the fact that William was out of her life forever, or not forever after all? In the back of her mind, Maria still hoped that a familiar fancy car would appear on the dreary village street. From there, William would come out with a huge bouquet of scarlet roses, approach Maria, and beg for forgiveness. Maybe even kneel down. Honey, I'm sorry. I don't know what happened. I was given. I was under hypnosis. I swear it will never happen again. I'd rather die at once than say one harsh word to you. You are my only love, my destiny. The wedding is to take place tomorrow. She will take out of her pocket a velvet box and put on ring finger a wedding ring even more beautiful than before. And she will forgive William not at once, but she will forgive him. After all, he could not really in his right mind and good memory to do such a terrible thing to her. And then there would be a wedding, a sea of flowers, a honeymoon in some sunny country, and many happy years ahead. Maria sighed and turned her gaze to the window. Dark evening clouds were floating across the gray sky, and a crow was ravening on the fence on the Xbox. How infinitely far reality was from the dream machine. But grown-up girls continue to believe in fairy tales, and Maria did not want to give up her faith in future happiness. In the meantime, she had to somehow adjust and appreciate what she had left. The first week flew by quickly. Every day Maria found more work to do in the house and on the property, and she wished it were spring and summer. Then one could have dug up the vegetable garden, tidied up the currant bushes and the old apple trees, and seriously hoped for a harvest. It would be a good help. There was no work in the village, so there was no money to wait for. Maria made a couple more visits to the store, replenished her supplies of the simplest and most affordable products. It was clear that austerity was ahead. Moreover, there was no telling how long she would stay here. Maria once again gave herself a bath day. She had already had time to adjust, to heat the water and sleep hastily, hiding close to the stove. She could not particularly enjoy the process. There wasn't much heat from the stove. A house did not walk well, so I had to wash quickly in order not to catch a cold. And then I heard something from the yard. "Hi, you're home. I brought a letter." It was Frank's voice. It was a very bad time for him to show up. Maria hurriedly shouted, "Wait a minute. Don't come in yet, please. I will." Now she was rushing about the room, frantically getting dressed, trying to dry her wet hair a little. Finally threw a towel over her head and looked out on the porch like that. "Come on in." Frank opened the latch, which was not difficult to reach from the street side, and stepped into the yard. Maria let him into the room. He noticed that the floor was now perfectly clean and took off his shoes on the threshold. With astonishment, he asked him, "Why are you doing this right in front of me? Here is a message," and handed Maria an envelope while the girl opened it. Frank left the house and went in the direction of the bath. The letter turned out to be from Jenna. Who else was it from? After all, no one else knew where Maria was hiding. Hi Maria. I tried to call you several times, but I couldn't get through. I had to go to the post office to buy a stamped envelope. I can't believe you missed it there. Write to me. We'll correspond too. Like in the last century, I have nothing new. Everything is more or less an apartment moved in. Kind of got acclimated. My parents have not grumbled so far. They are even glad I came back. As they say, in tight quarters. No offense. My job ended up being the end of the firm. Severance pay, of course, was not paid. They promised to pay me next month in Detroit, though. I called. They won't turn me down, but after Christmas she's having some difficulties. I'm still looking for a part-time job, but don't get too excited. I've got enough to live on for now. It's you I'm worried about. This is so stupid. Oh, and here's another thing. A girl from your job came to see me. She found my number in your address book. She called me first, and then we met. She's a nice girl in general. She said you were friends with her. She tried to call you, but the phone was silent. I tried to ask her, what happened there? She's the only one who said everyone at the company didn't know. They're wondering why the boss broke up with you. I gave her your address. She asked for it. You don't mind, do you? So expect another letter or postcard. There doesn't seem to be anything else to write about. Good luck. Low sight. Okay, you'll be fine. Why, Maria? Was the phone silent? It could be explained by the poor connection, which went down and then temporarily came back up. Maria herself couldn't call anyone. The account simply ran out of money. This became clear after she checked her balance a couple of days ago. She could only top up her account at the nearest bus stop. She had yet to get there. There used to be a terminal in the administration building of the village, but it had been broken long ago. There was no hurry to repair it. As Maria, Kate's aunt, reported, the rest of the residents of the settlement somehow managed to get out of the situation. But Maria herself was in no hurry. It was as if she was frozen, waiting to the settlers. And she tried to keep her head down. She wasn't going to call anyone herself, not even Jenna. And if William suddenly called, she both wanted it and was afraid of it. Except it didn't look like she was ever going to get a call from her ex-fiancé. Well, Miranda took the initiative. She wanted to talk to Maria. Only it was a pity Miranda did not know the reason for the break with William, although he would not tell his subordinates about the changes in his personal life. It was not in his habits. Maria's unhappy thoughts were interrupted by Frank's appearance. It's a mess in the barn, but we'll fix it. But not right away. I'll come tomorrow with the tools. Maria felt herself blushing. Frank, I can't do this. You don't have to take care of my bath, and you don't have to solve my problems. So I'm not particularly busy. It's not hard for me right now. Well then, I'll definitely pay for the work. I can't pay much now, but at least some. Frank certainly didn't like her offer. Do I look like a stiff? I don't want to steal from a girl. I'm just trying to help out as a neighbor. It's hard for you to be alone. Anyway, I don't take no for an answer. No, I can't take your help all the time. Maria had trusted people until recently, but now she no longer believed that a strange man could help unselfishly. It was too cruel a lesson she had learned, most recently from another man. In the meantime, Frank voiced another solution. Since you're so sensitive, let's make a different deal. Quid pro quo. I repair the bathhouse. You look after my mother. I have to go into town in 3 days. I don't leave her alone for long. I usually pay a neighbor to stay at our house, but frankly, it's Clara. Doesn't inspire confidence. I'd rather make an agreement with you. I'll do it. I agree. This arrangement at Maria's was the best way to go. You didn't have to feel obliged. On the contrary, it was nice to be useful. Well, that's good. See you tomorrow. About 10 minutes after Frank left, Maria heard complaints about flickering under the window. She looked out into the courtyard. A skinny and dirty white kitten was sitting on the ground. Maria carried the named guest into the house. She still had warm water, so she managed to wash the little one right away from the street dirt. Maria wiped him thoroughly with a towel. The white fur spread out. Soon he was crying with pleasure. Soup from the bag poured into a saucer. Maria stroked the kitten on the back. "What are you going to call you, a snowball?" "Deal." The mullah kitten threw back. Now we had to think about food for this little creature. But we couldn't throw it back out on the street. Within a day, Maria's had a small but serviceable jar in which the floor was no longer caving in and the boiler was working properly. How cool is it when a man's hands grow where they're supposed to? And then, at the appointed time in the early morning, Maria found herself in front of Frank's lot. He noticed her from the window and opened the gate wide. "Come on in. I'm about to introduce her to my mother." Maria went up on the porch, entered the house from the hallway, and felt the atmosphere of comfort and warmth. It was a dwelling with a calm and welcoming atmosphere in the spacious room where Maria Frank had taken her. The walls were covered with light-colored wallpaper, and the furniture was light, too. An elderly woman was sitting in an armchair, her blanket open, knitting something. "Meet Maria. And this is Wendy." "Hello, Maria. Thank you for agreeing to sit with me." It's been a long time since anyone called her. She can hardly remember the last time she was called that. Her mother had called her that before. And then at school, the schoolmistress, if she was particularly happy with her cars and grades, took her to the kitchen, showed her how the stove worked, explained what to heat up for lunch, when to give her medicine. "It seems to be all right. I went to the city is full, things to do in time. Just do not drive," Maria said quietly. She suddenly felt uneasy about the guy, who was in fact a stranger. "Do not worry. I drive carefully. If you need anything, call me. Here's my number." "Oh, I'm out of credit. I can't get any credit here." "That's okay. I'll give you money for the movie on the way." Okay. I'll give you my number." Frank looked in his mother's room. "Don't you miss me around here?" "We'll try," Mom replied with a smile. They did indeed spend the whole day. Not bored. Wendy proved to be an interesting companion. She remembered many amusing incidents from the past and treated Maria very kindly. Maria had been silent for a long time, and now she was just happy to talk to someone who listened to her attentively. However, Wendy didn't ask her much. She didn't wonder why Maria suddenly came to the abandoned village in late fall, more interested in her past life, her childhood here, her schooling at the local school. She herself had once studied there many years ago. It's a pity our school was closed, although there were almost no students left lately. Now they have to go to another village. Where does the school work? Bye. And in general, the village has fallen into disrepair. When I was your age, it was different. Both sighed, but didn't stay sad for long, and just switched to other topics. Wendy added, "But I still love my hometowns now. It's beautiful here in the summer. The river, the dumplings blooming. It's so wonderful." "Yes, my favorite flowers," responded Maria. "A little further away from the road, there's a whole thicket of them. No worse than some lavender in fields. I only worry that Frank is bored here," Wendy said. "He was born and raised in town. He only came here because of me. Isn't this a bad time? It's my disease. It's such a shame to feel helpless. You're bound to get better. You'll walk normally again." "I hope so." Then they looked at the photo albums. A great many of them had accumulated. Then they had lunch. Maria hadn't had such a delicious lunch in such a pleasant environment in a long time. She made her own special pancakes, thin, almost transparent, with greasy edges. The day flew by unnoticed. Maria didn't even want to leave. When Frank returned in the evening, they wouldn't let her go right away. They sat her down to tea with mental cakes brought from Maria's town, stopping by once in a while, please, when the time and the mood were right. Wendy asked her, "If you don't mind, of course, and if you're not bored with me, so you don't get bored at all. I'd love to stop by. If Frank isn't disturbed, when he's working on his drawings and plans, he can't see or notice anything around him. it is hard to disturb him. By the way, MASH, intervened in the conversation. Frank, you are an art historian by profession in the interior. Well, this is not really my area of expertise, but still more or less close. I know the basics. Why do I sometimes have to do interiors? But I'm more of an architect than a designer. A fresh perspective is always helpful. It happens. And sometimes there's not enough time to do all sorts of chores. Would you like to get involved? Salary, of course. You've already cleaned everything at home to a shine. There's basically nothing for you to do. It's boring to sit like this. I noticed you have a laptop. A special program I downloaded from a flash drive on a laptop. I think, quickly mastered. Maria about shining is exactly what she needed right now to feel needed, to do something other than cleaning and washing dishes. Isn't that a dream? And interior design has always interested her. She even wanted to sign up for an interior design course. But then the romance with William happened, and it became not to study. Moreover, William took her plans with hostility. Assistant manager of any courses not in their profile is not necessary, he said. It is better to pay more attention to the main work. But now no one had the right to limit the machine, the desire to learn something new. Day after day went by. Maria gradually got used to the new reality. She mastered the computer design program, being useful to Frank. Often she visited Wendy, helped her with her physical therapy exercises. After all, the doctor said that through exercise should have a chance to get back on her feet. Maria sometimes lingered on the visit. She felt comfortable and relaxed there. For the first time, she felt protected, as if she were in her own family, from which she had been cut off for a long time. On Frank's recommendation, Maria took a part-time job at the same firm where he worked. Everything was done remotely. She was enthusiastic about her new job and did her best, so that the pay, albeit small, but stable, received for a reason. The life of a modest, measured gradually became hectic, and the urban reality already seemed like a dream, which would not happen again. The only thing that bothered Maria was the pregnancy, so far imperceptible. But it was necessary to think seriously about the future child. Fortunately, the pregnancy proceeded without problems. Nature gave Maria good health. Despite her fragile appearance, she felt well. So Jenna's gloomy predictions have not yet come true. November passed. Snow fell and melted again several times. And then one day, in mid-December, a blue Opel appeared on the village street. Maria was just passing through the yard. The appearance of the car in the quiet street was an unexpected event. So Maria stopped. She did not immediately realize that she had seen the car before. A young man climbed out of the passenger compartment, who also appeared to be someone she knew. Yes, it was Ben. Deputy William noticed Maria and waved at her. "Hi, I finally made it to you." Even the navigator didn't help much. I had to ask the locals. Maria was still frozen in place, unable to figure out what the wind had brought Vep here or what he wanted with Maria. How did he know her address? He obviously didn't come to the backwoods village 100 kilometers from the city by chance. Meanwhile, Ben approached the gate and asked Maria, "Will you invite her to visit?" Out of politeness, she replied, "But come on in." "How did you get here?" "I was just passing by. I saw a girl I knew." He grinned, "Of course. I didn't come here by chance. I made you a cup of tea." "Good. The kettle's about to boil." "That's good." Maria's Ben's place was amazing. I didn't think people still lived in such conditions. People live in worse conditions, the girl said dryly. She didn't take kindly to that disparaging remark. Yes, her present dwelling was very humble, but she had grown attached to it and found it quite cozy. Some changes had taken place inside the house. Perfect cleanliness reigned here. Maria had decorated the place as best she could. New curtains and knitted napkins given by Wendy appeared in the room. Maria herself knitted a new colorful rug. At least there was a change for the better from the previous state. Reconciled, Ben said, "It's all right here. It just doesn't suit you." Maria poured a huge cup of mint tea and put a plate of cookies bought the day before at the village store in front of her guest. "Aren't you going to sit at the table with me?" Ben asked. Maria sat down, opposite, looking at him expectantly. However, Ben, as if testing her patience, and was in no hurry to reveal the reason for his strange visit. He drank tea, chatted about trifles, asked how she lived in such a remote place. "Do you miss the city?" "Not anymore." "And for work? By the way, I also do not work in the ranks anymore. I'm done working for other people. Now I've started my own firm. By the way, I even managed to lure some clients." "Yeah, congratulations, Maria. It's time to get you back to normal, I think. In short, I officially invite you to work. I asked Miranda to get your address. Would you like to be my reference? It's a familiar job. And I can even give you a raise." Relatively recently, Maria would have accepted a tempting offer without hesitation. She would have gotten up from her desk and rushed to pack her things. But now, just like that, to drop everything here and leave. And she still had an unfinished project. And she wanted to stop by Wendy's later that night. The day after tomorrow, Frank had promised to take Maria downtown to the local department store to pick out wallpaper for the room. Ben raised his eyebrows in surprise. Of course, he had expected a different reaction of gratitude, not a prolonged silence. "I don't understand, aren't you glad?" "Thank you very much," Maria replied. "I am very grateful. I just need to think. What is there to think about? Or do you expect to return to the same place in the line?" "No," she exclaimed. "No, I don't." "Oh, really? Then I must have imagined it. But what if you do?" "Wouldn't dream of it. Broken only a few. And what's the point of working for such a scoundrel? He's gonna fuck you over no matter what. You know what he did, what he got you out of." And Ben spilled everything he knew. He probably should have kept his mouth shut, but he was too mad at Maria. It wasn't like she jumped on his neck and gotten all excited about his offer. And she welcomed the city guest without much joy. It didn't turn out the way Ben had imagined when he planned this trip. Maria became alarmed. Was she about to discover the cause of her recent misfortunes? Ben, meanwhile, continued. "No one else could think of such a thing. He decided to test you, to see if you are worthy to become the wife of a man like him. Anyway, William called me into his office and offered to put me in touch with you. He wanted to know if you'd succumbed. Remember, I gave you flowers 2 weeks before it happened." Maria vaguely recalled that Ben had actually handed her a bouquet of pink chrysanthemums out of the blue and had been generally active around her lately. But Ben had not been stingy with compliments and small signs of attention before, and she hadn't given them much thought. She thought it was just appreciation for the fact that she often covered for him and didn't report to William about some of the slip-ups. Ben was sometimes late for business meetings or mixed up in contracts. Maria was used to smoothing over hot edges and quietly correcting employee shortcomings. It seemed to her that such an approach benefited the common cause and helped avoid unnecessary conflicts. "Well, you didn't take the bait. I didn't count on it. I had to use my intellect. I have an acquaintance, but as an acquaintance, I had an affair with her once, and then we dated from time to time. She looks a bit like you. Maria is the same height, slender figure, and long brown hair just like yours." Olenka, a responsive girl, agreed to help. "I also found someone who will take pictures. You, do not be angry, that's how it happened. In short, I gave William pictures of me and Emily in bed. You can't see her face there. No problem. You could be confused with you. I gave them to William that night, and the next morning already appeared in the office when the staff began to ask where you are. William replied that you no longer work here, and he forbade me even to mention you." Everyone was shocked. Maria was shocked, too. Ben's confession was hard to comprehend. How could he do such a thing? But that wasn't all. "You know why I did it. You think I wanted to do William a favor, don't you?" "No, Maria, that's not it. I just fell in love with you as soon as I saw you. I was no match for William. I hardly had a chance, so I couldn't let the opportunity pass me by. It was a coincidence that he was so suspicious, and he was up to the task of checking you out. Here I would trust you 100%. Maria, now that everything's cleared up, will you go away with me? I'm ready to marry you tomorrow. That's exactly the kind of woman I need in my life. We'll raise the firm together, you and me. And no intrigue, no scandals. Maria's eyes were full of dark spots. They painted on the walls. It never got to her. Why not? The man sitting across from her was almost proud of his own meanness and not ashamed to admit it. Neither was William. First, he made an idiotic test for his fiancée. Then he believed Ben. Then he threw her out without any explanation. Truly human meanness has no limits. Maria barely found the strength to utter "get out." I didn't understand. Ben was surprised. Are you kicking me out? I told you why I did it. I did it for you. I can apologize if you want. He still doesn't understand. I don't want to see you. Go away. And you can tell William that you two are the perfect couple. A couple of scoundrels. Who needs you? Do you think the crowd will run away? Only Ben's shards have red spots of anger on them. You'll still be mine. You're not going anywhere. You're used to the good life. I can provide it for you. Maria was disgusted to the point of nausea. Ben got up and put his arm around her shoulders. We will try to forget all the bad things. Come here. Don't touch me. It came from the side of the door. What's going on here? Maria turned around. Frank was standing on the threshold. Ben threw an exasperated look. And that's why you're so proud to have a new beau. I got one. Get out now, shouted Maria, and we'll forget the way here. Ben glanced at Frank, who was noticeably taller and broader in the shoulders. All right, stay here in the middle of nowhere. I'll leave you to it. And with an insulted look, he made his way out. The gate slammed. The blue Opel was sinking down the narrow street. Frank didn't ask Maria what happened. She told him everything herself, hiding nothing. She just needed to speak out, and just happened to be there with a true friend, understanding and ready to accept her as she was, along with all her past and endless problems. She sat back against Frank, who stroked her head. Yes, you had it coming to you. I had a feeling something serious had happened to you, but I couldn't see it coming, of course. Well, don't let it get you down. We'll get through this somehow. The day after tomorrow. It's not just wallpaper shopping. You still need to register at the antenatal clinic. How long can we wait? Now you have to think about the baby. It's not his fault. When there is a reliable support, problems are gradually solved, and life gets better. The snow was falling slowly outside. Maria was sitting at her laptop, working on another interior design project. A kitten was busily rolling a ball of wool across the floor. Maria and the snowball met the new year at the home of Frank and his mother. Now it seemed to her that all the troubles were over. What would happen next? Maria didn't know, but she didn't want to change anything. A soft melody played. Maria took the phone in her hand. A number popped up on the screen, which she had been meaning to delete from the phone's memory for a long time. But for some reason she didn't. And then she forgot. Hello, darling. I heard the confident voice of William, as always. How are you? Maria froze, blood pounding in her temples. She had looked forward to this call, but now she didn't know how to react. Why don't you answer? William asked. Can you hear me all right? I hear you fine. Then everything is all right. We need to have a serious talk. It's pretty clear, though. I wasn't quite right the other fall. I can pick you up tomorrow. What for? Maria replied. You've already made up your mind in the fall. Nothing else connects us. Wait. Not so fast. Yes, I was a bit hasty that time. But now I know all the circumstances. I know you're not guilty of anything, so we can start all over again. Nothing is lost yet. Are you sure? Of course I am. Can you believe this Ben guy set you up? He's a real jerk. And I believed him. I know, Maria said quietly. He laid it all out last week. He and I had some business dealings. But that doesn't interest you. I thought it over slowly with my parents. They don't mind either. Now about our wedding. You'll choose the dress. What do you want? I gave the ring back to the salon, but that's okay. We'll get a new one. You really think you can humiliate a man like that and then bribe him with a wedding dress and a nickname, and everything will be great again? William, not everything in this life happens the way you plan. Hovered pause, during which the ex-fiancé must have been trying to comprehend what he had just heard. It was a surprise to him that Maria is always so submissive. To everything you agree, dared to object. How could that be? After all, he had almost apologized, honored, offered to renew the broken relationship. Why doesn't Maria weep with joy and thank him? All right, baby, that's enough character. You're not going to refuse the wedding. No girl would refuse. By the way, you can choose where you want to go on your honeymoon, like Madagascar. I don't mind. There's not gonna be a wedding trip. There is no wedding. How hard is that to understand? Well, here we are. You're not going to stay in this village. And the baby, I hope you didn't have an abortion. Of course not. And the baby is just mine. Remind me what you said about him. I don't need to. I have an excellent memory. Well, I was wrong then, wasn't I? We'll fix it now. William still couldn't believe that Maria was no longer under his control, out of his influence. However, Maria ended the useless conversation, said one last time, "Please don't call me again." That was all. She already knew, no matter how her fate would turn out in the future, she would never regret her final parting with William. No amount of money would outweigh his selfishness and callousness. Everything is a comparison. Now she understood that there are other men, reliable and strong, ready to unselfishly come to help. Let Frank remain just her friend, because between them are past, and a child by another. All the same, as long as Frank was there for her. Snowball broke away from his exercise and ran to the door. He smelled the arrival of the one who had often spoiled him with various delicacies. And sure enough, Frank entered the room. The expression on his face today was somehow unusual. Maria noticed it right away. "Maria, we need to talk." He stopped in front of him, looking directly into his eyes. "I've been putting it off for a long time, but today it's as if someone told me to. I can't wait any longer. I have an obsessive thought. Suddenly you leave, and I'm so afraid of losing you. I want to be with you all the time. I raised the baby as my own. He's like family to me now. Will you marry me?" At once tears streamed down Maria's cheeks. This time tears of happiness were difficult to say. She just hugged Frank silently. That's how the black streak in your life ended, though it may have ended even earlier, on the day in November when Frank first came to this house. Things moved quickly from there. Maria and Frank got married and started a happy family. Closer to spring, Wendy was happy, back on her feet. The treatment gradually helped. Soon the whole family, including Snowball, moved to town. William tried a couple more times to meet with Maria. However, he soon got into big business trouble, and he didn't have time for meetings. Or maybe he realized that Maria was lost to him forever. She was happy with Frank. The village where their happiness began, they don't forget. In the summer, they will definitely visit there again. After all, the lumpen blooms are so beautiful here in summer. The transparent river splashes merrily, and the gentle sun shines brightly.